35 years ago in Charlotte, North Carolina, an iconic fit made its debut.
The Washington Post headline was my most memorable. It said, "Hoop Couture. Julian designs pro uniforms and is paid in pork." And it just, it went everywhere, and everybody was so excited about it. When the team finally came out, they just went crazy.
I'm Anissa Khalifa. This week on The Broadside, we explore a pivotal moment in fashion history when purple and teal ruled the world. And we'll trace the connection between international clothing trends and one of America's most successful cultural exports, basketball. Hey, this is Anissa. I just wanted to take a moment to let you know that we can only do what we do with your support. That allows us to bring you original reporting every week about the stories that matter to you, about our home, this fascinating place that we live in. To support the show, go to this week's episode description and click the link, or go to WUNC.org and click on the donate link in the upper right-hand corner. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the show. Dear listener, today we are taking you back to 1988. Ronald Reagan was president.
My fellow Americans, this week was the start of the 8th year of my presidency.
Greed was good.
An Oliver Stone film, Wall Street. Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
And the very first computer virus began to spread on the early internet, a full year before the World Wide Web as we know it would even exist. But here in North Carolina, the biggest news was the arrival of professional basketball. On November 4th, 1988, the Charlotte Hornets made their debut in the NBA. Like most expansion sports teams, they were overmatched and frankly, kind of terrible. They lost that first game by 40 points. And things wouldn't get much better. The Hornets finished with the second worst record in the league that year. But they looked incredible while doing it. Purple, teal, and pinstriped. The jersey and shorts they wore that year were the work of one visionary.
In '81, I was the youngest inductee to the Fashion Hall of Fame at the time. I beat Calvin Klein for the first Cutty Sark Menswear Award. I'm given credit for bringing a tasteful color into modern American menswear.
In the late 80s, Alexander Julian was a young fashion designer having big success. Along with folks like Ralph Lauren, he was at the forefront of bringing high fashion to the masses, and one of the icons of preppy style. But he was also a major college basketball fan.
I was born and raised in Chapel Hill. If you don't like basketball and you're born and raised in Chapel Hill, they leave you on the edge of that town over there called Durham.
As the Hornets prepared for their NBA debut, they needed to find someone to design their jerseys. And they wanted to make a splash. So instead of going to a sports apparel company, they chose Alexander, a North Carolinian with high fashion cred.
And so I was the first professional fashion designer to design NBA uniforms. It was completely unheard of. It was revolutionary.
When George Shin, the owner of the new team, initially reached out to Alexander about the project, he didn't offer much guidance, but he did ask if it would be possible to incorporate some of the colors that architects had chosen for the new team's arena. As Shin ran down the list, one jumped out.
And I said, teal. And he said, yeah, teal. I said, teal is one of my signature colors. Teal and purple are two of my signature colors. I use them because they look good on every skin tone. And they were not in the NBA at that time.
He quickly got to work on the prototypes. Along with his trademark colors, he added a few other Alexander Julian touches. Pinstripes, knitted into the jerseys.
And then I did the world's first pleated basketball shorts.
That's right, pleated basketball shorts. The bold colors were already a big leap, but the shorts were a major change from what was popular at the time, in more ways than one.
I was influenced by Michael Jordan as a Tar Heel, and who was playing in the NBA and was wearing oversized shorts and nobody else was. And so I increase the length of the shorts and the circumference of the legs so that it was a longer, baggy short.
Now, he says they were baggy, but you can watch the dramatic unveiling of the original uniform on YouTube. And I will just say, these shorts are very short and quite tight. Still, there were a lot of nerves about how it would all go over, and a lot of eyeballs were following the story.
We had incredible national press before they played the first game. And part of it is because of my payment choice.
As we've already established, Alexander is a proud North Carolinian.
Well, I'm a Tar Heel born, a Tar Heel bred, and when I die, I'm a Tar Heel dead.
And that led him to come up with one of the most unusual contracts in American history.
My first trip down to Charlotte to work on these, and George said, am I going to be able to afford you to design these for me? And I said, George, it would be my honor to design these free of charge. I'd be honored to do this. But if you sell copies of these uniforms, I'd like my usual 5%.
But due to complicated rules about profit sharing within the NBA, Shin claimed he couldn't give him a cut of the sales.
So I said, well, let me think about it. So, I was living in Connecticut, and it occurred to me early one morning, what good is more money if you can't buy Carolina barbecue in Connecticut, So I called him up and I said, George, I got a deal for you. What is it? I said, I'll trade you ownership of the Hornets uniform design for 5 pounds of Carolina barbecue a month, FedEx to me in Connecticut. And I think he was rather pleased, shall we say, that he had been able to pull that off.
With attention and pressure mounting, the Hornets finally unveiled the uniforms at a press conference featuring Alexander and player Kelly Tripucka. The reaction was strong.
It was a major heart in your throat kind of thing to see if people were going to go for that. And they went for it in a huge, huge, huge way.
Hello again, everybody. Along with Steve Jones, Skip Carey welcoming you to another night of NBA basketball.
Despite the fact that the Hornets lacked a superstar player, it was one of the most popular jerseys that the NBA had ever seen.
This is the hottest ticket in a long time in Charlotte.
And they flew off the shelves.
And so I traded my usual 5% for 5 pounds of Carolina barbecue, and they sold 300 million. So George got rich and I got fat.
The influence of the design was widespread and unmistakable. According to the sports fashion blog UniWatch, of the 22 new or renamed major North American sports teams in the 1990s, 11 used at least one of Alexander's signature colors. 2 used both purple and teal. But they all owe a debt of gratitude to Alexander Julian and the 1988 Charlotte Hornets.
It's a sign that you did the right thing. It's flattering, and yet at the same time, concerning a bit because you take a huge risk to bring out something new, and as scary as can be, and then it goes over big, and it goes over so big that everybody copies it.
Coming up after the break, we'll dive into the lasting impact of this iconic fit and find out how the design launched a worldwide sports fashion craze, along with a little help from another famous North Carolinian.
AI chatbots parse information. But have you ever considered their romantic potential? In a new 3-part series on love and AI from Embodied, we'll explore the intricacies of human-bot relationships, learn about the past, present, and future of sex robots, and meet people uploading conversations with their loved ones into software in hopes that it can help them grieve. New episodes drop each Friday in February, starting on the 9th. Subscribe and follow Embodied so you don't miss it.
I'm Anissa Khalifa, and we're back with the broadside. The Hornets jersey signaled a global movement that changed basketball and fashion for good. And that's a story writer, filmmaker, and fashion maven McCrary McGuire is working on telling in a forthcoming docuseries called Tunnel to Runway, the history of fashion in the NBA. Crystal has a unique and personal connection to the topic.
I would say my closest introduction to basketball fashion, quite honestly, would be when my former husband played for the New York Knicks in the 90s.
And I want to focus on that time period because a catalyst for this conversation is a 1988 Hornets jersey, which was one of the first pieces of NBA apparel to really start a broader fashion trend. But you can't talk about that era without mentioning another figure who also came out of North Carolina, Michael Jordan. So how did his emerging star power impact how people viewed sports fashion?
Right. Well, one of the things about Michael Jordan, coming out of North Carolina, going to UNC. My son Cole Anthony, who plays in the NBA now for the Orlando Magic, he also went to UNC. Go Tar Heels. I got to get that in there. The influence and impact and reach of the NBA grew exponentially under the marketing opportunities that came about because of Michael Jordan. This singular, once in a two-generation player who was so extraordinary on the court, but also just incredibly marketable off the court. And he was essentially this brand ambassador for the NBA, a global brand ambassador. Here you have a Black athlete on a cereal box that families of every color, every ethnicity, every religion would, who would see this, Black man's face on their cereal box in the morning, and in advertisements across, multiple brands. And that sort of being the backdrop of this Charlotte Hornets jersey, it just was an expansion and a continuation, again, of the boldness and the reach of, anything within the NBA ecosystem. But that's how much Michael Jordan became a part of the zeitgeist.
Connecting the dots to today, how would you define basketball fashion? What is basketball fashion?
Well, basketball fashion today, 2024, has really obviously evolved for a host of reasons. But I would say now it's inextricably linked to a player's personal brand, a player's personal sense of identity, which varies from player to player. We see players now who use fashion for protest, whether they're remember they were wearing the I Can't Breathe t-shirts after Eric Garner's death by the police in New York. And the NBA has come on board with that as well, understanding that social justice and criminal justice reform is something very important to their players. And so, of course, they have to reflect what is important to their players. But then I've also seen, players now with their personal brand expressing themselves, fashion through their hair, fashion through body art and tattoos, fashion through their jewelry. And of course, high fashion, because you now have players that over the last decade plus that are fixtures at New York Fashion Week, fixtures at Paris Fashion Week, sitting next to Anna Wintour, players like Russell Westbrook, who's sort of like the maverick of NBA, the modern day era of, the NBA fashion icon. Top professional athletes from around the world, but in particular, NBA players are a part of the fashion canon around the globe and have really expanded on their brands beyond just what they're doing on the court, beyond just the sneaker company that they may be endorsing. So I think more than anything, fashion today in the NBA, it's of course tied to the culture, which varies from player to player, but is really tied to their individual brand.
And do you think, outside of the basketball world, outside of the fashion world, for people who aren't closely connected who aren't fans, has it changed the way we dress? Has it changed the way that people relate to fashion in any way?
Well, I think it's similar with any sort of celebrity, public figure, icon. You have people looking to what they're wearing to, imitate it. Which is why they're so sought after, whether they, it's a shoe company or a high level designer that wants because they're influence. They have swag. They're looking to, with any of these, in the fashion space, they're looking to capitalize on the following and influence of the NBA players that have this massive fan base, domestically and globally.
Today, players are style icons on and off the court. NBA teams in particular obsess over every aspect of their uniform designs, sometimes releasing 4 or 5 variations a year. And sports jersey sales are a big business that generates billions of dollars annually. The world of sports fashion has come a long way since the debut of the Charlotte Hornets. But even way back then, fashion designer Alexander Julian could see a glimpse of the future. Whenever he's asked about the impact of his iconic purple and teal uniform design, he's reminded of a phone call he received in 1991 from Hornets owner George Shin.
And he said, Alec, I just went to China, and guess what happened? I was on an airplane in China, and there was a boy wearing a Hornets cap. And I got a translator, and I went over and I said, tell me, do you love the Hornets? And the boy said, I don't know who the Hornets are. I just like the colors.
This episode of The Broadside was produced by me, Anissa Khalifa, and our editor, Jared Walker. Our executive producer is Wilson Sayre. Special thanks to Maria Villanueva for her help this week. The Broadside is a production of WUNC North Carolina Public Radio. You can email us at broadside@wunc.org. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a rating, a review, or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll be back next week.